Hello everybody, I'm back with the next educational video. Now we have been talking about knowledge for the last several weeks, and we discussed at length about epistemology. Now in this video I'm going to expand it beyond epistemology so we can understand how different fields of research, science and knowledge they try to establish their own knowledge based on the definitions that we have discussed previously. Now, to start, I have summarized 6 case scenarios. These are hypothetical case scenarios that I have put on the Facebook CBT group for discussion. And this is just the summary of it. In terms of what I posted in the group, there was further detail to each of these points. So quickly to go through them, one of them was about anecdotal observation about the efficacy of Senna-Maki leaves in COVID patients. And the discussion was, and the questions that I posed were, does that make it an effective treatment? The second case scenario was about an individual or individuals who go through various types of stressors like economic, financial stress, stress related to jobs, stress related to domestic situations, and other stressors who become depressed. And why do we treat their depression with chemicals or drugs as well? And so the point I wanted to highlight through that case scenario was the psychosocial aspects of depression. The third case scenario was about the dilemma of subjective reality in psychosis. So it's whoever has psychosis, whether it's hallucinations or some type of thought disorder, that all seems very real to them, but we treat them based on that being not real. And how do we sort out this dilemma, and whom do we treat and whom we do not treat? The next case scenario was effectiveness and social acceptance of faith healers. In some countries like India and Pakistan, there are thousands of or tens of thousands of faith healers, and millions of patients seek their help, and millions of individuals feel that they do benefit from these faith healers. So how do we sort this out in the face of medical sciences? The next point was, our case scenario was, safety benefits of wearing a helmet when riding a bike or a motorbike. And the question was, because it is established that wearing it makes it safe for the people riding the bike or motorbike, do we have the authority to force it on other people? And the final case scenario was off-label use of and promotion of chloroquine in patients with COVID. Now, all these case scenarios were intended for a broad discussion around how we sort these things out. And whenever we try to sort these things out, we basically are aiming at improving our knowledge. And knowledge not about just about information, but knowledge that is defined by, that we have discussed at length in the previous discussions. Now, let's move on from knowledge to piecing together the bigger puzzle. And here, if we want to understand epistemology or knowledge, we have to be familiar with at least 3 or 4 other definitions. And I don't intend to get too much into discussion or details about these definitions, because the aim at this point is to make you familiar with these terms, so that when we use them down the road, you know what they mean. And the exercises or clinical scenarios or real life situations that we will discuss in the coming weeks and months they will help you understand these terms better. So ontology is basically about the nature, it addresses the nature of reality. So what is real and what is not real? And how can we define reality and how can we study it? So in terms of the case scenarios that I summarized in the previous slide, someone who is having hallucinations or someone who is feeling paranoid, their reality is different than people who are not experiencing what they are experiencing. So and similarly, so we don't understand. We have to come to some sort of understanding about what is reality, because if we don't come to some understanding about what is reality, then our whole thesis about, our whole process about understanding what is knowledge or trying to establish knowledge will be found on weak grounds. The second term that we need to be very well aware of is epistemology. And we have gone through this at length. It's not information. It's not whatever you come across. Knowledge is a very defined term. It's an objective form of verifiable truth that takes the form of a belief. Now, the third important definition is methodology. And methodology, I would like to emphasize that methodology in this context is different than the methods we use in specific studies. So methodology is a much comprehensive or much basic term than the methods. So it defines methodology. Once we know what is ontology or what is reality, or what constitutes reality, and then we try to establish the truth and knowledge pertaining to that reality, we have to have a method or methodology to study it. And that's what methodology is. It's a systematic methods that can be used to acquire knowledge, depending upon the ontology. Next term is axiology. Axiology pertains to the understanding of the value or the worth of what we are studying in the context of morality or ethics. So we have to balance, we have to balance worth of what we're trying to study. If it is worthless or it doesn't have any value, or we can't assign any value to it, then it's probably not worth studying. But at the same time, if we are eager to study it, we have to observe certain moral and ethical obligations, both when we are formulating the study as well as whatever are the results. And we have to take all that into both individual, social, cultural, political, all those aspects to understand what is the worth and the ethics around that specific type of knowledge or study. Now we all these terms, as I said, you will get a better understanding when we discuss real case scenarios. Now, to put the pieces together, when we talk about ontology and related methodology and thus epistemology, all these combined are called paradigm. And so depending upon ontology, how we understand reality, what methods we use to study that reality to come to a truth that is objective, verifiable, so that we can believe it, is called a paradigm. Now, you don't see axiology within it because axiology is a phenomenon that is keeping an eye on all this from the outside. So you can think of axiology as the judge. So the ontology, methodology, and epistemology are all these combined as a paradigm, are the processes to acquire knowledge, and axiology is the judge that is keeping an eye on how we acquire knowledge and how it is used. Now, if we read about paradigm, there are lengthy debates about how many types of paradigms are there and how we can classify them, and some people can tell you there are 20 types of paradigm or 10, 15 types of paradigm. We can, in my view, we can summarize them, especially in terms of the medical sciences and psychosocial sciences. We can group them basically into 4 major paradigms. The first paradigm is called positivism, and it is based on, its ontology is that there is one unified or universal truth or reality. So that's the ontology behind this approach, this paradigm, and it emphasizes that that truth can be established through precise measurements. So, and I'll explain this further when we go back to the case scenarios, but 2 things to remember is that it assumes that there is one reality or universal reality, and to accomplish the truth about that reality, we have to use precise measurements. The second one is called interpretivism or constructivism. So interpretivism is from interpretation, and this particular paradigm assumes that there are multiple realities, and because there are multiple realities, they have to be studied in an interpretive way or in a constructive way. So we can construct that reality based on those multiple realities, and that's how we acquire knowledge. The third main form is the pragmatic form, which is basically that means that you deal with it as you see it. And according to this form of, according to this paradigm, the underlying ontology is that reality can change. So it can change over time, it can change within a setup, it can change between the setups, and the best way to study is to use the tools that apply best to that situation. And this is called pragmatism. So in a way, it is a mixture of different types of paradigms, and in particular, it's a mixture of positivism as well as constructivism. Now, these 3 forms of paradigms, they basically they cover 99% or 95% of biomedical sciences, biological sciences, physical sciences, and psychosocial sciences. But then there are other areas that these paradigms will not cover, and one of the important areas is about social justice, political activities, activism, economic justice, and for that, the paradigm we use, or the paradigm is called critical paradigm. And this paradigm's ontology is, and the methodology is based on historical realism, meaning that we have to look at things in a historical perspective, and there is a subjectivist epistemological position. While epistemology emphasizes the objective nature of the reality and truth, in critical paradigm there is also an emphasis on the subjective epistemological position. And that is because when we talk about, for example, poverty, that is a subjective experience. So if someone who has not lived a poor life and now is doing the research, he or she will not be able to understand just based on some scientific data that what poverty means, or what oppression means, or what injustice means. So that is the critical paradigms has that approach of historical realism and subjectivity in terms of the reality. All these again, the axiological element again is not within these paradigms. It is something that will be applied from outside to ensure that what we are doing has a value, and to ensure that we are following some ethical and moral standards. Now, let us go back to the 6 case scenarios, and I'll very, very briefly try to highlight that what methodologies or what paradigms or what approach or ontological approach will best suit these case scenarios. Now, in terms of anecdotal observation about the efficacy of Senna Maki leaves in patients with COVID, the first one, the positivism one, will apply, and that's what is usually used in empirical research. Empirical research is double-blinded studies, placebo-controlled studies, so we can establish the efficacy of a certain substance in a double-blinded manner and in comparison with the placebo, so we can rule out the placebo effect, we can rule out the therapist's placebo effect as well. And if we establish that for Senna Maki, then we will have an established knowledge that whether it is effective or not effective. In terms of the psychosocial reasons of depression, and as in the group, a number of you have pointed out that we follow a biopsychosocial model. So when we are going to follow a biopsychosocial model, we are going to use both the positivism paradigm as well as the constructivism paradigm, because the psychosocial aspect will get covered through the latter. Now the next is the dilemma about subjective reality in psychosis. We can have a lengthy discussion around it, but this will be because the reality of the patient or the individual who is experiencing psychosis is different than the reality of the majority. So this will be a bit tricky. There will be a lot of philosophy around it. There will be a lot of discussion about what is reality and what is not reality. There will be discussion around when does reality, what is normalcy, and when does loss of contact with the reality become lack of normalcy. So there can be people out there, especially with people with certain personality traits, who may feel paranoid, but they are not necessarily abnormal. We can't call them as they are not normal. So those similarly, we will have to discuss about individual freedom versus individual rights versus threat to the person himself or herself and the people around them. So all this will have to be discussed. So there will be a tremendous amount of axiological element in this discussion. With regards to effectiveness and social acceptance of faith healing practices, we will have to use, essentially at some point we might end up using all 4 paradigms that I have mentioned in the previous slide. And the reason is we have to ensure social justice. And if we are unable to provide social justice and people are using a certain type of treatment that they feel is effective, and we don't have studies to really establish that those are not effective, and there are tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of people who don't have access to what we believe has been tested and is effective, then how are we going to meet social justice issues? Either we provide them that care, and if we are unable to provide them that care, do we have a right to stop them from seeking a care that they believe is effective? Now, of course, again, the issue about harm will come into all this discussion. If they are getting exposed to something that is causing them harm, besides or harm that is more than or in addition to what their original illness is causing them, then we have a problem. So, but all this will need studies that will address all those 4 paradigms, that will go through all those 4 paradigms, and that will have a major axiological element to it. Then safety benefits of wearing a helmet while riding a bike and its enforcement. We know helmets prevent life-threatening injuries, but again we are stuck with self-determination here, and that's a domain of axiology. And I know a few of you on the Facebook group commented that because it's safe, it has to be enforced. But I doubt that who said that realized that even in the US, there are 3 states where there is no law about wearing a helmet. And even in the remaining 47 states, there are laws that vary between states. Or if we talk about the established self-harm aspect, the extent of self-harm is much, much bigger and huger with cigarette smoking. So can we enforce that people should not smoke cigarettes? Like, why don't we apply the same principle that we should enforce people to do certain things on cigarette smokers then? Because these are very sticky matters, and they involve a lot of paradigms besides a very cut and dry one reality. You measure it with data. We use statistics. You use quantitative statistics, and you just determine, and then you enforce it. Finally, off-label use and promotion of chloroquine in patients with COVID. Again, we will have to establish it through proper quantitative studies. So we'll use the positivism paradigm. But the issue here was, in this case scenario, I wanted to highlight its promotion. So when we start promoting something, especially in this era of social media, the extent that it gets promoted may be irreversible. So if we start promoting it without establishing its efficacy and safety, that it can be used, and the message gets out very quickly, because we are going through a pandemic, and now we have billions of people who are exposed to this information, and among them there are hundreds of millions of people who start believing in this information. And 6 months later, we have studies that show, no, it is not effective. Were we justified in promoting it? Yes, I understand that some of you have commented that we can, or at least one I recall, that we can use off-label medications, and that is justified, yes. But what about actively promoting it, especially on regular media and social media, without the evidence? So these all scenarios were simply for our general broad-based discussion. And now the talk ends here, and hopefully now I will move on to the next topic, which will be more about applicability and practical aspects of knowledge. And I hope I'll cover it within the next couple of weeks, and then I'll have a brief talk about it. Thank you very much. Bye.